Good afternoon, folks. Sorry, let me get the graphics up here. This is Robert Chapo, Executive Editor at Madison365 with your daily update for today, Wednesday, March 30th. We're going to jump into COVID first because, I don't mean to panic anybody. I think we're going to be all right. I don't suspect Omicron level surge is coming. However, there are some numbers too that have me a little bit concerned. Two numbers in particular: the daily average of new cases, 518 new confirmed cases reported today, which on its own doesn't sound like an outrageously high number for a Wednesday, although the last couple of Wednesdays have been lower than that, and we are now at 345 new cases per day in the past 7 days. That average was 327 yesterday, and it was 314 on Monday. So undeniable. That's the first time that has gone up at all since the 9th of January. Right, we've been in basically a free fall, leveled off, still pretty level, right? 315, this is per day, right? So to go from 314 to 345 over 2 days could be just an anomaly, could be just more people getting tested, that kind of thing. But it could be also the beginning of the BA2 variant taking hold in Wisconsin. The percentage of positive tests is at 3.1, right? 3 is that magic number statewide. We want to see that at below 3.0. It's been below 3.0 for the past since the 11th of March. Now it's back up over 3%. Not great. Okay. Now, I did look at the variant report, which comes out on Thursday, so we'll get a better look at that tomorrow. But it does not differentiate the different strains of Omicron. Right? Omicron as a variant is actually 4 subvariants of Omicron. BA2 is the one everybody's worried about. It seems to be more transmissible than Omicron B1, or the original is not B1; it's B11 something. But the original Omicron, which is far more transmissible than Delta, which is in turn more transmissible than Beta, etc. But BA2 is more transmissible by a factor of about 50%. So the difference between original Omicron and BA2 is not as big as the difference between Omicron and Delta. Okay. Not only that, but when the Omicron surge started, we were already at 3,800 cases a day. We're now at 345. So a surge might get us to 500 or 600 cases a day and then die down. We don't know. So the other thing is Omicron is just never took hold in terms of deaths. There were deaths. We got as high as 39 deaths per day, very briefly. But now we're at 9 deaths per day. Now, if there's a surge happening right now, we won't notice the deaths for another month. So don't put too much stake in that. The other thing, though, is hospitalizations also continue to fall. But then again, if there's a surge happening now, hospitalizations won't start to go back up for another week or 2. For today, however, 172 people currently hospitalized because of COVID, 27 of them in the ICU. These are pretty low numbers, which means hospitals have the capacity right now. Not a lot of capacity. I'm not going to say everything's fine, but there is capacity right now to handle a surge if it's manageable, if it's small, if it's not an Omicron spike. Okay, so it is getting to be spring. There's going to be more outdoors, but there are no masks. Nobody's wearing masks anymore. There's no masks in school districts. There's no masks in Dane County, or I should say no masks required, right? If you are vaccinated and boosted, you should be fine. You could test positive, and you would likely have very mild symptoms. If you're not vaccinated, get vaccinated. I don't know what you're doing. Get vaccinated if you can. There will be a point when we say maybe we should be masking up again. In large crowded spaces, I still do, frankly. But because I'm vaccinated boosted, I don't do it for myself. I do it from people. So again, not crisis, not surge. concerning. Okay, we will keep an eye on it as we do every day. So let's get on to some other news then. We have speaking of COVID, we know that the pandemic fundamentally changed a lot of things, and we're doing a series on that called Lasting Impacts. And if you go to Madison365.org/lasting impact, I'll put a link in the comments for you. You'll see some of these stories. We've done 4 of them so far. Got another one coming tomorrow. But this is, sorry. When that link, ignore that link that I just put in the comments. So the one we have today is about workforce and workplace. And I interviewed Francesca Hong, who owns a restaurant downtown Madison. I interviewed entrepreneur named Serena Beecher. I interviewed Mark Richardson, who's a career consultant. I interviewed Kurt Rose, who is the president of the Urban League of Greater Madison Young Professionals. I interviewed lots of people, mostly from around Madison, about the workforce. And a few themes developed. Number one, obviously, hybrid work is here to stay. Nobody's going to, for those jobs that where remote work is possible, nobody's going back to 100% in person anytime soon. You don't have to. Number two, that has implications. That means you can recruit differently, right? You don't have to recruit just here. You don't have to tell somebody from Atlanta that they have to move to Madison to have this job, which means you can recruit more diversity. And because the pandemic and the murder of George Floyd are inextricably linked forever, the pandemic led to more attention on that issue, which led to more intentional racial equity work in the workplace. Also, much higher, I heard this from many, many people, much higher premium on mental health for employees. Mental well-being of employees is very important now more than ever. Baltazar de Anda Santana, the executive director of the Latino Academy of Workforce Development, said it very succinctly. Workforce development is human development. And it has always been true. We've just been forced to reckon with that now. Right? And one last trend that I'll mention, there's a lot more of this in the story. It's a long story. If you want to read it, sit back, give yourself some time. But the other trend is that people want to work at companies and organizations that reflect their own values, which means companies have to take a stand on things. And some companies don't want to be political, but some values are not political, right? So a lot of interesting stuff. Talked to a lot of really smart, insightful people. And I commend that to you. It's if you go to that link, Madison365.org/lasting impacts, the story is there along with a few others on various topics related to the permanent changes the pandemic will bring. Also today, we learned that Chinese-American journalist and activist Helen Zia will give a lecture at the UW Union South tomorrow at 7 to 8:30 p.m. at University Hall in Union South. It's presented by the Wisconsin Union Directorate Distinguished Lecture Series and the APITA Student Center, the Asian Pacific Islander does the American Student Center. And it is titled The Power of Unity and Re-Envisioning America, celebrating the beginning of, the closing of Women's History Month and the beginning of APITA Heritage Month in April. Also, finally today, Dr. Christine Navia has been named Vice President for Inclusive Excellence at Marquette University in Milwaukee. She returns to Wisconsin after a stint as Chief Diversity Officer at Texas A&M University Corpus Christi. Before that, she's worked for a long time at the UW system. She was named an Outstanding Woman of Color in 2010. She received the President's Award for Distinction in 2018. She was the Associate Vice President for Student Success and later the Interim Special Assistant to the President for Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion at UW System. And she will begin work at Marquette University as basically the Chief Diversity Officer there VP for Inclusive Excellence, on July 1st, 2022. So that is the news for today. Once again, the COVID numbers not looking terrible, but going the wrong direction, basically, slowly, pretty steady still, but two metrics, number of cases on a daily basis and the positive test rate, both rising slightly. We will keep a close eye on them. And we'll have the podcast in the morning. We'll have updates throughout the day tomorrow at Madison365.org, as well as on our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pages. Until then, have a wonderful evening. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. And we will talk with you soon.
This is 365 Media.